All right. Welcome, everyone. It is Monday afternoon, December 14th at 3 p.m., and this is the City of Topeka's Public Health and Safety Committee. Sort of. It's our pre-scheduled meeting. We have on Zoom Councilman Neil Dobler, who is part of the committee, Councilwoman Ortiz, who is the third person on this committee of three of us, had a personal last-minute call for 2:30, so she will be joining us as soon as she can. We're going to go ahead and start. Also welcome Scott Gowan from USD 501, Michelle Stubblefield from Greater Topeka Partnership, Corey Wright from the city, and Megan Bottenberg from Cox. And out here, I always forget. What's your rank now? Sergeant. I was going to say that, and then I thought I was wrong. Sergeant Clam from the Police Department, and City Manager Brent Trout. And intern, shadowing Trout, Adam Vaughn. So welcome everyone, and hopefully we'll see. There's Mike Siebert from SRS. Hi, Don McWilliams from Boys and Girls Club. We'll keep watching for Councilwoman Ortiz, but we'll get rolling. Today, our agenda, after we call to order and approve minutes, we'll first focus on broadband and internet connectivity. Second, get an update on the unsheltered population from Sergeant Clam. And third, talk about the property maintenance code. Make some progress, maybe even conclusions on that one. Any additions or corrections to the agenda anybody has? All right. We'll call the meeting to order and invite a motion to approve the minutes from November 16th.
I'll make that motion.
Councilman Dobler moves, and with lack of a third person on the committee, I will second. Any discussion, corrections, additions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And aye. Minutes are approved. We will move right into discussion of internet reliability for Topeka residents. We've got some updates on here that we'll invite, and then talk about what next steps, where we should go from here. First ups for updates would be USD 501.
How's everybody doing? So I can report that we actually delivered a report to our Board of Education on December 3rd is the date that I want to say, whatever that Thursday was. We presented to them with the latest information that we had available from our Cox partnership. We have about 3,034 families serving roughly 5,900 students from our district of 13,281, if I recall correctly. So we are serving a pretty large portion of our students. There's still more that are eligible. We estimate about 988 are prepared to be served by our Cox partnership, but the families have either chosen not to do that or have had some outstanding balances or other things that may be presenting a problem for them. In addition to that, we presented to our board that we had 1,127 hotspots provided by T-Mobile. You look over my left shoulder, you'll see that they're still in process, and we are getting those out to families who are either awaiting final connection to Cox or who are in transition and aren't able, without a fixed address or something along those lines, for where a situation in which a hotspot would be a better choice for them. And so that's where we stand right now.
So what does that mean? And if you can pull those numbers together in terms of how many students are being served and how many you're not sure.
So we've got the 5,900 are being served through the partnership, and there's about 900-ish families that we could serve, but have either chosen not to be served. We do have some that are being served by other businesses. They're not participating in Cox. And then, like I said, we do have 1,127. As we learn about a family that cannot connect, the school contacts our office, and we get them, now that we have the hotspots on hand, we get them a hotspot while we get them connected to Cox or help them with their strategy for if they're going to connect somewhere else. But as of right now, the only ones I know about have a hotspot waiting in the office ready to go.
Okay. So I'm hoping that I'm ratcheting back through all the different discussions we had to catch them with you.
Yep.
There were issues then of kids with multiple homes.
Yes. For
Go
those
ahead with that one.
students, we've generally recommended a hotspot. If it's a student that is either unhoused or inconsistently housed, we've recommended a hotspot in that situation, or set up the Cox partnership at their predominant house. If they have connectivity in other houses and just in their current residence didn't have connectivity, then we use the Cox partnership for those situations.
Okay. And then as we explored what barriers not only kids but others could have, we explored just understanding, having the hardware and
Yes.
understanding how to make it work. Can you talk about where you are with that?
So we've reached out to several families where they have multiple kids connecting to the same, whether it's a hotspot or whether it's their same home-based provider. We've talked to them about strategies on reducing bandwidth consumption. For example, not running a TV in the background that uses the same type of connection, or for example, turning off the video so that the demand can be rotated among the students, and we worked with that strategy. The other thing I'm proud, well, no, I shouldn't steal Cox's thunder. Oh, but I will. Go ahead. Is it okay, Megan? Thank you. So Megan has shared with me that Cox has doubled their bandwidth effectively for the Cox partnership that we have. So instead of 25 megabits per second, they're now connecting at 50 megabits per second. So that has helped a number of our households in and of itself. It's a phenomenal thing that they're doing. And correct me if I'm wrong, that's for the remainder of the year? Yep, for the remainder of the school year, as I recall. So we do have one huge barrier, and that is that our partnership is scheduled, not our Cox partnership, but the grant that funds our partnership for TPS 501 is scheduled to conclude at the end of this month. And so we are seeking out grant opportunities to be able to continue funding for that. But as of right now, a lot of it depends on what's going on in the legislature. So keep your fingers crossed.
Well, that is great news. All of that is great news. Again, it's been sort of fascinating for us to explore what the issues are. Councilman Dobler, do you have some questions for Scott?
I don't really. I mean, I'm thrilled to hear about the upgrade in bandwidth. I think, you know, one of the two original questions were, do folks have access and what kind of speed were we talking about? I think the original speeds were probably adequate for, it sounds like maybe one or two people, but this sounds like a huge upgrade. Thanks to Cox and the 501 partnership, I think that's outstanding. No other questions?
That's great. Related to that doubling of the bandwidth, is there some sort of scientific or semi-scientific monitoring going on to see just how much of a difference that is making? Maybe that's a Megan question or a Scott question.
There really isn't much monitoring that we can do on that end. I will say that we've heard less about connection issues since we've noticed that has taken place. More of the students that we're having connection issues with have been a result of either a device issue or something along those lines. Software issues a lot of the time. They got dropped out of a Zoom, but everything else was working just fine. So those things we can kind of handle on our end and do some troubleshooting with Zoom on. But I haven't heard a lot about families of 3 or 4 students who are just congested at this point.
Good. Well, and you called it the device and software. I mean, as we kept peeling the onion, as they say, it was like, oh, well, maybe people just don't know how to hook up a router, or don't, you know, there was everything from the issues of where you were in your house.
Absolutely.
Compared to your router, but then the whole issues of software and hardware. So at this point, if I recall, you were saying that people could call 501 for technical assistance.
Yes, that's correct. So they called our IT office, which is different than the district number. They call our IT office, and we do what troubleshooting we can do on our end. First thing we look at is we'll look at things like number of people connecting in the household. Is it a stable connection? Is it one that we're using, or is it one that is a third party? That's just helpful to know. And then we also explore other things like, were there other connectivity issues that they were having? Were they able to go to the internet? That kind of stuff. We try to isolate all of it so that we can determine if it's a Zoom issue versus being a device issue versus needing to be something else that need to be troubleshooted on a different level.
Are you finding that you are the only resource these families have for that kind of assistance, or in conversation and coaching and so on, are you discovering that there are other resources for people in the community for that kind of help?
For learning, I don't think we're the only resource. Obviously, we have different teams at TPS that are handling the learning side as well. So we're not really the only resource from that perspective, but I do feel like there needs to be additional resources for our families. Again, we can troubleshoot a connection issue, or we can kind of point them in the right direction on how to solve it or how to limit the broadband that's being consumed. But beyond that point, there is definitely room for there to be a community strategy in order to serve people beyond the students of TPS 501.
That's what I was fishing for, because
Yeah.
everybody has focused on the kids so much, but we've got seniors, we've got job seekers, we've got people trying to work or get jobs that they can pull off, and so.
And truthfully, we've got somewhat of an easy situation because we've sent out Chromebooks and iPads, and both Chromebooks and iPads are centrally managed devices.
Gotcha.
Meaning that I can see what a Chromebook is doing, whereas a laptop that a teacher might have, or some of the other device types that could be out there in a person's home that are not connected to TPS 501. We know less about those other devices than we do about our Chromebooks and iPads.
Good point. All right, well, anything we should have asked you about that?
The only thing I will share with you guys is I did get the opportunity to listen in when Dr. Anderson presented to the Shawnee County delegation of the legislature. And I will say that there seems to be some positive momentum towards community-based strategy. And so some of the stuff that we've been talking about, it sounds like we have some ears that are willing to listen. And so I think that this is an excellent opportunity for the work that we have before us.
Great. That's good to hear. Any particulars yet, or just the momentum?
No particulars, just receptive ears at this point.
Okay.
I will say that grant funding is going to be a key opportunity. Obviously, like I said, with our grant ending at the end of December, that's going to be our big focus right now, is trying to secure what we can do a January payment with. And so I think grant funding is going to be a key opportunity going forward.
Well, our very next agenda item was hopefully listed as Cox Communications additional CARES Act decision from Congress, that Megan was hopeful that would be done by now. So Megan, we'll turn it over to you for some updates. Thank you, Scott.
Well, thank you, Scott, for your continued partnership and working so well together. We truly appreciate you all. As Scott mentioned, we were thrilled to increase the speed for Connect to Compete. That is going to occur through the end of the school year. So we will roll it back once the school year is finished, into anticipation that all the kids will be back in school in person next school year, knock on wood. So in terms of a couple of things, one, Cox, we are continuing our expansion projects out in North Shawnee County, just north of Topeka, out in the Siemens School District. Those must be completed by December 30th. They are on target to do that. Most likely they'll be completed on December 30th. But we have sales folks that are out there working with residents, getting everything scheduled. So that is good news on that end. We do not have any clear direction from Congress yet in terms of if they will extend the deadline. We're still waiting to see. Last week, they passed a 1-week financial package to keep the government going. So we're waiting to see what the next steps are on that. In addition, right before Thanksgiving, Governor Kelly announced a new Broadband Acceleration Grant Program. This is a grant program that is consisting of $5 million for the first 3 years annually. Then it will increase to $10 million for the next 7 years. This was included in the Kansas Department of Transportation's Eisenhower Highway Plan, Transportation Plan, that was passed by the legislature earlier this year. Those grant applications will open close 1st of January, and then awards will be determined right around March, I believe. Cox has been looking at some options, and we'll continue to look at those options, but most likely we are so focused right now on our current expansion builds and wanting to make sure those are done and done right. We'll probably focus on that at this point, but we continue to look at other options. And as Scott said, there is definitely an appetite at the legislature for this topic of broadband, both expansion of infrastructure as well as adoption efforts. I think they were very pleased to hear this week. I was also at another committee hearing. They were very pleased this week to hear of the adoption efforts that I know Cox has been working on with 501 and other school districts, but as well as all the adoption projects that are going on throughout the state to help make sure that kids have connectivity. So those are a couple of things that we've been working on and updates from us. Obviously, we work very hard to make sure the network is working properly and that our kids have connectivity, as well as the families and everyone who is working and schooling from home.
It sounds like that the doubling of the bandwidth was something people hadn't contemplated at first, but has made a difference. Is that kind of thing even being considered in the future forward broadband initiatives?
At this point, our Connect to Compete program will go back in June, I believe, back to the current or the downward speed of, or the previous speed of 25.3. That is the FCC minimum. Of course, if you are a Cox subscriber on any one of our other plans, you may have higher speeds than that. And we offer up to 1 gig speed. So you could have 150 megabytes per second download and 3 upload speed. It varies depending on what you sign up for in a plan. But for the Connect to Compete program, we recognize that there are multiple students working from home, schooling from home. We know that parents are also working from home at the same time. And we recognize that more people are at home. And so obviously we needed to increase the speed, which we have done for the rest of the school year.
Okay. Councilman Dobler, questions, comments?
Still no question.
Okay. Just the exploration and discovery and how nimble Cox has been, and are these reports at the state level uncovering other innovative ways that you all hadn't thought of between Scott and Megan as well, or are you in the lead?
I'm not aware of any other innovative things that I've heard coming out of there outside of some of the stuff that was presented by us, and obviously Cox made a presentation as well, as I recall, Megan. But yeah, I'm not aware of any other kind of innovative strategies that I heard there.
I will just add in too, I think from a state perspective, there is an appetite to ensure that everyone has connectivity. I think we are only starting really the discussion, and I think you will see more innovative ideas come out of it and opportunities available. It will take a public-private partnership for some of it, and so we are well aware of that as well. But I think what we have done with just the CARES Act dollars alone, whether it is the infrastructure expansion or the adoption efforts, and Topeka is a great example of this. And what, Cox has done with both 501 and our expansion, I think that's just, we're at the cusp and we have more to go. And I think you'll start seeing more innovative ways, start, having more ideas. And Cox is obviously ready to be a part of the solution. We have been, and we want to continue to do so.
Well, thank you. I'm just trying to, on behalf of Councilman Dobler especially, see if there are any more close-in rocks to turn over that would do magic things for us. Do we have other conferees that want to give us updates? I see, Dawn, that you're on, and let's see. Any changes or challenges that you're thinking of with your multi-kid programming?
We have 3 clubhouses just packed with kids, and I say that lightly, obviously social distancing. We've been able to eliminate waiting lists at our teen center and our Adams Club with the creative use of space to make sure that we were serving the kids that we needed to. But after the last meeting that I attended with you all, I tried to drill down and get a little bit of understanding as to why the families had selected Boys and Girls Club. Very, very low percentage was connectivity issues. The highest percentage of need was based upon single working parents who actually had to go to work and needed a safe place for their kids to go and make sure that kids were participating in their remote schooling the way that they should be. So, but again, we're serving Topeka Public School students, elementary at our Adams Club. We are currently at capacity, although we do not have a waiting list as well. And at our teen center, we're just about at capacity there. And then we're serving students from Pauline South and Pauline Central in grades 3 through 6 at our Montera site, because those students are remote learning from that district as well.
Great. Well, thanks for doing that checking, because I think we're all wanting to understand the best that we can where the problem is.
Absolutely.
And, yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Michelle, any insights from the connections that you're making and working on?
I don't want to interrupt Michelle, but I just wanted to make one additional comment. One of the things that we saw with our teens was the need for some internet safety programs and digital literacy, where kids were kind of going and using the internet. And so we rolled out a comprehensive program for our kindergartners all the way through our 12th grade teens to make sure that they're being safe on the internet. So just wanted to add that in there. I'm sorry, Michelle, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, you are A-okay. You're A-okay. We're fully in support of all the efforts being made, and we continue to monitor that as well. It's an important component to Momentum 2022, so we stay abreast of everything, that all the good work that everyone's doing. So any support we can provide, we continue to want to do that.
Thank you. And I don't see everybody on the screen here since I'm live, but I guess Mike Siebert's on too. And so, Mike, anything?
The only thing that I was, in regards to the Boys and Girls Club, knowing that they're full, there is a program that is opening up today. It's at 35th and Highway 75, and they're willing to work with 501 as well as the Seaman School District. But it's called Sunflower Remote Tutoring, and they have room for 12 students. They're going to have college-age students be there to tutor. The cost is $10 an hour. There's 2 different sessions. They do not feed lunch or anything like that, though. It's mainly geared towards that parent that has a kid at home and they're not doing their homework, and they're probably trying to do the math that is now taught in the schools that isn't anywhere close to the math that we grew up with. And so to have somebody that actually knows how to, I'd say do Greek, but I'm better at Greek than I am the new math. So, but they're available to help them do that. So, but it's called Sunflower Remote Tutoring. And her contact information, if you're interested, is 785-215-0919. They're located in the, used to be a Methodist church there at 35th and Highway 75 on the southwest corner.
Thank you. Anybody else that is on that would have any updates? If not, we'll move on. There was some discussion of possibly talking about the prior broadband group and what its accomplishments and future were. I don't think we've got anybody here that can do that unless somebody raises their hand. If not, let's move on to our item 4, which is a possible future broadband leadership structure. What do we need? Again, this committee was started at Councilman Dobler's behest with the idea that maybe there was some connectivity and structural things we needed to do, and we moved way beyond that. But perhaps this did get slowed because there'd been some momentum and initiative, and then kind of nobody was in charge of keeping people talking to one another like we have been. What would be best? Lazone Grace has had some ideas and had hoped maybe he could be on. I think he's out of town actually, but has been working on a digital inclusion model that I think Michelle has been involved with. And most importantly to me, since I got it this morning and didn't have time to read it all, was who's on the back page that was suggested as who should be part of such a partnership. But for those of you who are on the front lines, especially, advice to us as a council committee, we can have some discussion, including Councilman Dobler as well, of course. Where should we go from here for Topeka, Shawnee County? Topeka especially. Mike?
I think the thing that has to really be watched is the amount of broadband usage that's available with anything that you add. When you have more than one student at home and possibly a parent that's working from home, to make sure whatever service you're using can carry that load. Some of the things that are out there are pretty limited. And so and I don't know the technology of it, but I'm sure Scott could talk to it, in his sleep. But that's one of the things that I would be very cautious about jumping onto too much that wasn't really searched that way.
Okay.
To that point, we're at a point where we need to kind of think as a community. So obviously we want to get whatever initiative moves forward, whatever leadership structure moves forward should be community driven. It should include stakeholders, obviously, because that's valuable, and it also brings a lot of different perspectives into play. But one of the key things that we'll need to address is, to Mr. Siebert's point, are we looking at a system-wide structure where it doesn't matter how many people I have in the house, we're all going to connect to a community broadband? Or are we looking at a house-centered structure where it's more about the services that we can get to the house and what students can do with the services that we have at those houses? And so I think that that's kind of an important first step. Are we doing one? Are we doing the other? Or are we doing both? And what does that look like? What options do we have to service that? Because I know the initial community broadband effort was centered around having a broadband solution that was available throughout the community. But it was also centered around getting connectivity to areas that are not currently connected. And so those are different beasts to tame. And it's a question of how we want to split up that effort into tackling those different directions.
So
I think it's important to have stakeholders involved in that discussion so that we can aim in the right directions.
Gotcha. And so if I got that right, if you were going to set up the operational goals, it would be looking at getting the connectivity to the house or the property, and then the capacity to use it. Is that
it's kind of an either or both. So either we have a community broadband wireless structure that's available throughout the community, or we have, or we pursue a home-based model that is about services connecting in the home. And then we do need to be considered, we do need to consider the speed connections, because that's where 501 is right now. We're providing a service with Cox's partnership into the home, but that service is not a one student household is going to have a different service experience than a 5-student household. And so that's why, to Mr. Siebert's point, we need to look at whether we're looking at a community-wide, anywhere you walk within the community footprint, you're connecting to the same type of service, or are we looking at a home-based service strategy, or both?
Madam Chair, if I could.
Sure, I'm trying to make a list here. What would you, before you talk, I'm trying to follow what Scott has. And what I have is that there's to the house, and then the capacity to use would include the bandwidth, if you will, the hardware, which we've talked about, and then what would the right words be, like just 2 words to describe knowing how to use the hardware and have the right stuff? You know, what you talked about, like the difference.
Capacity to use it, capacity, professional development, learning, training, whatever kind of fits that piece there.
I might call it skills to use, and then add what Dawn mentioned about safety.
Yep.
Just trying to bullet out what boxes we need to check off to say, yeah, we know what we need, and we'll
Right.
know when we've got there. Okay, thank you. Councilman Dobler, wherever you are.
Thank you. I'm still in the same spot.
I couldn't find you on the screen, all by myself.
All right. I think when we started talking about this a while ago, the idea was we know this is a bigger issue than just the city limits. But since we represent the city, that was a good place to start. I think since we have some of our initial questions answered at this point, and we're looking for a structure, kind of a leadership structure to take us a little bit further down the road. Probably a great time to incorporate more than just the city of Topeka. And I guess I'd ask Michelle to talk a little bit. I mean, it seems like the Greater Topeka partnership would be the perfect structure maybe to take this the next step. Not that we would step totally out. Probably like to be involved a little bit, but maybe Michelle, you can talk a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've kind of discussed this with the rest of the group, and I think what we've determined is, based on 2015, we kind of helped to lead some of that, and what we discovered is that we're not the experts. We are more than willing to serve on a task force and provide, whatever is needed to be a part of that and move that task force forward. But I think what we've determined from a leadership perspective, we are not the ones that should be leading it, based on that 2015 history. However, I think what I would say is we are more than willing to support. And I think Karen Lazone had sent you a document, and I have not seen that. I have seen that document like you just this morning. I think it provides some good work. However, I think a task force does need to be developed to look at that and then make final recommendations to finalize that document. I definitely think it's a good plan that should be considered. However, I think the leadership I would propose would probably need to be part governmental, part corporate, part community leadership to get that moving. Probably like a tri-chair establishment.
Because interestingly enough, his list, and he went out of his way more than once in his very short cover to say this is a draft. It's maybe a next level, but it's a draft. So, and I appreciate the work that's gone into it, and want to respect, what he's got stuff in here. But there's nobody on the list.
That's why I say it's great work.
there's nobody on the list except you that's on this call so far. So how should we, anybody, how, again, I think this faltered because perhaps as Scott was saying, the focus was on just, or Neil, that the focus was just on getting service. But we found that we're maybe 90% down the aisle on that, but the issue is using service. How do you activate that and get everybody engaged? And so that is different than it was before. But somebody needs to lead it.
In most cases, we would probably say that because it is a governmental, it's community, but it's also governmental with the infrastructure, and it's.
But basically, as far as the government goes, and of course, Brent's here, but all we do is just get told that there's nothing we can say about where the poles go and where the equipment goes, and we go, okay, and execute franchise. We're not actively involved in planning it or developing it, or it ends up being reactive for government. I can't speak for the county, but I think it's probably about the same.
Well, we're more than happy to help facilitate that initial group to come together.
I wonder if this is the domain of government as opposed to Greater Topeka Partnership, which I appreciate that context. Perhaps the next step is with JCAP, since that is a joint city-county organization that does control some funding. Perhaps can take the next step. I'm not talking about funding to do the project, funding to get the initiative started. Maybe that's a good.
I think it probably needs that dual government conversation agreement.
Councilman Dobler, I'm not sure what our issues are here, but I could basically not hear you. I don't know if I've asked Taylor to help out, but if you could get closer to a mic, that might help when you speak.
I don't think that's it. I think there's some background noise that I'm picking up here. I don't know if anybody else can hear me or.
I think we got rid of the background noise. When you speak a little louder, I can hear you a little better. That's all I can tell you.
I can't do anything different. This is the same setup I have for all day long. So
okay.
Yeah.
It might be us. I just was hoping. All right. So maybe Michelle, if the people who are on the screen can hear better, we're discussing that that city county be involved. Is that? You're going to have to help me because I couldn't hear. Michelle,
I think what he had suggested was to have the next conversation to happen between at the JADO meeting to get some consensus between city and county and leadership, and then following that, depending on what's determined, GTP is more than willing to help that to help determine who the lead would be. GTP's interest is more than willing to be involved, but preferably not to take the lead based on past history and our experience in the.
You know, when I'm thinking about the experience that we've had with this committee, and then what Michelle, you talked about in terms of the 2015 thing failing, it would seem that what has really worked is that we've had Dawn and Scott and the senior centers, for instance, before, and Megan, who were boots on the ground, actually interacting with families every day who are trying to connect. Whereas perhaps, and I'm just talking, okay, that the GTP and the governments are enough removed that they don't know. I mean, those of us on these calls have learned a lot, and have also seen that it appears that networking made a difference because people were able to go back and look with a different lens, push the agenda a little bit, differently, and that the networking has been good, which, and the kinds of things that seem to value wouldn't have happened if the boots on the ground folks weren't on the call. So I think the sense that I'm getting is that maybe we should talk about it at the JADO meeting, but maybe there should already be a suggested list of who those boots on the ground folks would be, because the city and the county and JADO and GTP are kind of arm's length removed in a funny way. I'm just throwing that out to help explore, because it'd be good to even go to a JADO meeting if that's where it's supposed to be talked about, with some more ideas on how to configure that group. Scott?
Yeah, if I may, I was going to say I'd be more than happy to be a stakeholder and definitely involved in that. I do think it's critical to have people from multiple walks of life and who can bring that to the table. I don't know the makeup of the earlier initiative. I joined it at the very end, but I do think that some important groundwork was laid with that earlier initiative, and so I do think that there's some value in picking up from that point at the very least.
And I'll just chime in here too as well, in terms of, as you consider that, I know providers, including Cox and AT&T back in 2015, we were not necessarily at the table until later on in the process, just by providing information. So we would greatly appreciate the opportunity to be at the table early on. I think we can be an asset because we are providing opportunities, and not only can we help provide access, but we truly, as we've talked about with Topeka, it's an adoption issue. It is an issue of trying to help folks get internet service. They already have it, access to it, but for whatever reason, they have not adopted it into their home. And so I think with Cox's and AT&T's experience across the country, we're able to bring some innovative ideas, partnership opportunities that can be helpful with everyone. And then as we discuss getting it out into the county, we certainly want to be included, because we are in the county, and we always look at opportunities and ways to expand. So that would be my one request in terms of, I think writers do need to be at the table and do need to be involved. I would also caution, there's a lot of work being done on this same issue, whether it's adoption or it's access and expansion, both at the state and the federal levels. So we can certainly have more interested parties involved that can provide a well-rounded approach to this.
And when you say that, that means, obviously, I'm trying to follow all these conversations, that, keeping in tune, for instance, with what's happening at the state, what's happening with Congress, not just policy, but what people are thinking and where they're moving with it.
Absolutely. In addition, FCC has, they have expansion opportunities and grants that have been awarded. And so, more details, I think, of that will come out later, first of the year. So I think there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that are happening, because we know how important broadband is. And so I think if you had the providers at the table that are assisting with these efforts, it will be advantageous for everyone.
Well, and maybe, again, I guess this is being recorded for posterity, but that sense that it would be a conflict of interest and you're the bad guys or whatever is resolving itself out, which is good. Big business and so on. Others that should be at the table based on our recent experience. Welcome, Councilwoman Ortiz.
And I would say that document that Lazone provided has an initial list of those that he sees he envisions on being, but I'm sure that can be added to.
It's a fairly short list right now. I mean, when I'm looking at it, and it has himself with IVSA, and he's knowledgeable and an advocate, so that's real valuable. He has a Washburn student working with him who is familiar with that area. He's got you, he's got the YWCA, and he's got the library, and that's all so far.
Oh, he's got community affiliations also listed, but he didn't have exactly from groups from different specific parts of Topeka.
Well, that just sort of repeats. Then he kind of plugged in
Exactly.
some different sectors without names,
Yeah.
and didn't have any names for corporate. So he's just trying to outline it more than But this combination that we've had of folks who are both advocates but are actively engaged in making the system work seems to have been the most valuable.
Absolutely.
With this process that we've had anyway. I'll lean back toward my colleague, Councilman Dobler. I guess, I mean, as chair of this committee, we're wrapping up our service for this year. We need to be thinking about whether this would continue to be, whether we as a committee would recommend that this be on the Public Health and Safety Committee agenda at all next year, and if so, just for quarterly updates like we've had with homelessness, or whether we see this committee as taking an active role. If we think somebody else should, if possible, we should be putting together how it should go. JADO, which Councilman Dobler suggested, meets only quarterly. They won't even meet till March, probably, I think, in 2021. It might be possible to talk them into a special meeting for that purpose if we really felt like that was the place to house it. I don't have answers, I'm just the chair.
I think it might be good. Am I coming across better now?
Yes.
I think it might be good to have some maybe offline conversations with our counterparts at the county, see if there's an interest there. We could potentially direct this back to the city council with the action to, this is kind of convoluted, but the action might be to refer to JADO for establishment of a committee. I don't really feel like we can take this on long term, but certainly if that committee gets established and potentially has some funding and some staff support of some sort, perhaps that comes from the city or the county or a combination, then it gets off to the right, on the right foot. And frankly, that may take a couple of months to get all of that established.
Well, I tell you what, we are likely to have at least a short meeting in January. If you would be willing to make those calls, perhaps chat with the city manager. I'm not going to put him on the spot too much here, but he's here. And perhaps Michelle as well, have a chance to visit with Michelle and perhaps Lazone a little bit more. And if you would be willing to maybe put pencil to the paper with how we might shape up a proposal before mid-January?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that on.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Karen,
Yes,
JADO meets February 10th.
okay. JADO meets February 10th, that's the first meeting, but again, it's quarterly. So, all right, well, we'll look forward to a report and maybe fleshing some of this out a little bit. With that, we will finish our, Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure that we will have this on our agenda again in January, that we won't let it go until we know exactly where it's going.
Yes.
We've made a lot of progress, and we don't want to defer away from that. I apologize for being late, but I just wanted to make sure that that was what we were planning to do.
Well, and Councilwoman Ortiz sounds really great. The audio and the video is great, so whatever you worked on at your house, right, after all this good advice?
Absolutely. I wasn't going to take up much time, but Scott is the man, and he is really digging into helping people along with Megan. So we've got two strong people on two opposite ends that are connecting and that have connected the household, the Ortiz household. So I'm very appreciative to both of them. I won't say that Scott forged my name, but there was conversation about that. But it's all good. We're just again just building on these little bugs and getting them all out. And I'm hearing from a lot of people. So we need to work on Neil's mic next, and that'll be good. But yeah, I just want to thank the team for just troubleshooting and getting on everybody and just keeping up. That's what we need. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And with that, everyone is welcome to stay on. We're going to move to an update on the homeless report. Sergeant Clamp.
All right, well, thank you for having me. I guess we'll start with the population numbers. Right now, it's all an estimation. My guess is we have somewhere between 200 and 250 unsheltered in the city of Topeka. It's very difficult this year to give you solid numbers. Last year at this time, we had 10 cities still in place, which had the vast majority of our population in one general location. So we could give you much better numbers this year. Because that's no longer in place, our unsheltered are really scattered throughout the entire city and starting to move out into the county as well. So it's much more difficult to give solid numbers, but that's my guess, around 200, 250 individuals. What I'll share first is some of the good things that are occurring. The department has purchased with the CARES Act money a lot of, and I don't know how well you guys can see on the video, but it's basically a balaclava with also another face attachment. So what we were able to do, we had to look for, looking at COVID, how can we limit the spread of COVID or potential spread within our homeless camps and within this general sensitive population. And so initially we talked about masks and hand sanitizer. However, this population, for the most part, I don't believe are going to wear masks like we wear masks day in and day out. So instead, we went with these thicker, wind-protected, and some of these are wind-proof balaclavas that they can wear to A, keep warm, and then B, it'll also help reduce the spread of any particulates coming out of their mouths and stuff, since they'll have almost their entire face covered. So we purchased almost 300 of those that we'll start handing out on Thursday. We haven't got all of our shipments in yet, but that's coming. And then we also ordered a large quantity of hand sanitizer as well that we'll hand out with the masks. Again, and that's just to try to keep any COVID concerns to a minimum with this population. So with winter coming and with leaves dropping and things like that, I can tell you that I receive, I don't know, I'm not even sure how many complaints or concerns I receive a week. It's a lot when we talk about our unsheltered population. I'm sure Mike is getting the same thing as far as people can now see camps where before they could not. And so that's been a big issue. I've had lots of conversations with community members about where individuals are legally allowed to camp, where they're legally not allowed to camp. Most of these individuals are on private property or on state-owned property. So just to go over a few specific ones that we hear about a lot, like the First and I-70. If you're going westbound on I-70 at First Street, that is a former camp. I will tell you, it's abandoned. With that said, it was abandoned as of last week. Last time I was in it, we actually moved those individuals from that location to an area that they're legally allowed to camp. And all that stuff everybody sees through the trees is what they left behind. I've had conversations with KDOT. It's also railroad property, but I believe myself and KDOT have been scheduled 2 different times to go out there and work on getting that cleaned up, but every time we have a scheduled date, some type of weather, instead of whether it's snow or rain, has gotten in the way. So I believe that's still in the works. Some of the other concerns down south, like near Kansas and Topeka, where those two intersections come together, or two roads intersect. There's some camps in the trees right there. A lot of that is Kansas Turnpike Authority property. So again, it's state-owned property, and then just north of that, there's some other camps and some trees, which is all private property. So those are some of the struggles that I run into on the enforcement side of things. I chat with individuals, I encourage them to move, but without complainants or without someone who has control over the property saying they want those individuals to be moved, I have no legal authority to actually move them or as far as trespassing, anything along those lines. Those areas do not fall under the anti-camping ordinance that the council passed a little over a year ago. So there are some camps, talking about the camping ordinance in North Topeka, that are in violation, and some enforcement action is probably going to take place later this week due to those campers' refusal to move. They've been given ample notice, and they're refusing all services. They're refusing to move. So some enforcement action, unfortunately, will probably take place in the next day or two if they still refuse to. But that's happening as far as that's going to happen in the North Topeka area that they're in violation of that ordinance. Working with the Rescue Mission still, working with Vallejo still. It has been a challenging year with COVID, with donations, things like that, as far as getting items out to people that are in need. But we're still working with folks. The housing options are very limited right now, and that's also been a big struggle. No one hears from the Rescue Mission, but with their COVID protocols, that's been another struggle, getting individuals into the Rescue Mission, especially as the weather gets colder. In the past, when I think it's 30, 40 degrees. I can't even remember their exact cold weather rule, but once we had a certain temperature, anybody was allowed to stay overnight at the mission. Well, with COVID and everything, that's not being allowed right now. So there's some other things in place that we're working on, trying to keep people warm and dry. But it's definitely been a struggle so far as with outreach. I can tell you probably on Thursday, myself and a few people are going to go out. We got a donation of boots and some blankets, sweatshirts, things like that. So we're going to be going out on Thursday and trying to hand out a lot of these masks and a lot of boots and things like that compared to tennis shoes, especially with the weather changing. I expect we're going to get snow at some point, so that'll be some good for those folks. But just trying to keep up with the population. It's not necessarily that they're growing, in my opinion, but they are very much more spread out compared to years past, and that's been a big challenge. If you drive, and when they spread out, they're spreading out all over the city, but they're also spreading out in areas which is very difficult to get to. So like if you're heading northbound over the Kansas Bridge and you look toward the river, you will see multiple camps lined up along the river. That area has grown since Tent City was demolished, but that's a very difficult area to get down to. If it's completely dry, my SUV, which is two-wheel drive only, can get down there. Not sure it's supposed to go down there, but it can. However, with that said, I've also gotten it stuck down there. So that's a challenge. If you go southbound on the Topeka Bridge and look off to the west, you'll see a growing number of camps over there, which is city-owned property for the most part. That's actually almost becoming not quite as messy as Tent City or as populated thus far, but that's becoming a high populated area of unsheltered individuals, and that's very difficult to get to. So unfortunately, I can't get over there as often as I would like. And I can't even tell you how many people are in that camp right now because it's so challenging to get there. So we do have some requests in for some vehicles that'll help with that, but we're waiting to see about approval. So I think that's about all I have at the moment. Do you have any questions, or does anybody have any questions?
Councilwoman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sergeant Clam, good afternoon.
Good morning, or afternoon. Yeah.
I don't know what's going on, but right there, when you get off of I-70 and you're getting off on East 10th Street, that little curb there, did that used to be where a lot of people were at? Because they've left a lot of trash. It looks terrible. Are you aware of that? Can you tell me what's going on?
Yeah, so at 10th and Jefferson right there were individuals who were camped underneath the bridge. They were told they had to move. They were actually one of those individuals was the first to receive a citation as far as violating the anti-camping ordinance since they were underneath the bridge. They moved from under the bridge just directly over into those trees. And I'd have to go back and look at the Shawnee County Appraiser website, but where I believe they initially started was city-owned property. I was actually told today that that whole area has now been bulldozed. It sounds like maybe some property owners got together and did some landscaping. And so I haven't been there, but I got notified of that maybe an hour ago, and I haven't been by to see what it looks like. Those individuals were not the cleanest of campers the entire time I've known them. So unfortunately, they just leave a big mess. I'm sure that's what it is, but unfortunately, I haven't been over there to see. But I was told that area got bulldozed or at least severely cut down by either a professional company or by the community members who lived right in that half block area.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of it. It does look terrible. There's a lot of debris and stuff, you know, and it's very noticeable. Like you said, since the leaves and trees are gone, it's very, very, very noticeable. And I know we've had some issues back there on the tracks and stuff like that. So just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that.
I'm aware, and I'll get over there and verify what's going on today or tomorrow.
Okay. I noticed you said you were going to hand out some items, some boots and coats. How are you going to determine where you're going to hand it out at?
So basically, I'm just going to hit the different areas that I know have a larger population of unsheltered, and just kind of see how many people are there and go until we hand everything out. So like. And it's going to take it's going to be challenging. I need to talk with Mark at TRM since he has a truck. I haven't mentioned this to him yet. But like the camp on the south side of the river, west of the Topeka Bridge, where the population is growing a lot, we have to have a truck to get down there. And so, but I'd like to hit that place. There are a lot of the camps along the North River I'd like to get to. The South Kansas Topeka general area, and then over on Wanamaker, there's actually quite a few very small camps over there, but they're very spread out on the Wanamaker corridor as well. So basically just kind of hit the different areas. I know there's a higher population, and then see how many people we find.
Well, I'm sure once the word gets out, they will be looking for you. Are you going to make sure that they know where to contact you?
Potentially. I mean, we'll have to see how much stuff is left over. And in the past,
Okay.
in years past, because TRM and Vallejo have scheduled outreach times where I go out when my schedule allows me. In the past, when we've done things like this, let's say we have 5 or 10 pairs of boots left over, I usually give those to TRM to hand out since they're on the street more often than I am, or cases of water, whatever the situation is. So, I mean, people will usually know how to find me, but if they can't, whatever I have left over, I usually hand over to, like I said, Vallejo or TRM, since they're out on the street more often.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Other questions? Comments? All right. Councilwoman Ortiz, again, as we're wrapping up this year, what this turned into being like a quarterly check-in, right?
Yeah.
Is that how it worked this year? Wrap up, and what would you recommend for next year's Public Health and Safety Committee?
I would recommend the same, Karen. I think it's been very rewarding to see what is going on. How well Sergeant Clam does a great job, and I just think when we get these questions about people in different areas, and we're filled in, then we know what to tell some of our constituents, and also how to kind of better help him. I know with COVID, it's kind of been hard now with us going into the winter. So I'd like to see us keep that on our agenda. I think it's been very beneficial. And it also helps us to know how we can help him. He said he needs an ATV, or some type of vehicle, or, maybe there's a horse out there. I don't know. We've got to figure out how we can help him. And with the city manager, I see his pen writing, so I don't know if you'll get an ATV or a horse or what, but he did let us know, and I think it's nice to have that one-on-one. So I'd like to see us continue.
All right, well, I will not put it on the agenda for January, but put it on our sort of carryover to next year recommendations. If it were quarterly, that would mean March, probably for 2021, but we'll see. Before we let go of this entirely, I see that Corey Wright is on, and Corey was doing the housing program. Corey, do you have anything to update us on while we're on?
Sure. So the last Housing First that we did for a period of 6 months, we had 24 households that included 30 people. So there were a few households that had multiple people. That's almost ended. We only have 3 people that were extended, and they were extended for extra months because they're close to being sustainable in their housing, and so we've extended it to give them an opportunity to get sustainable. So I think these results are really good. We reminding you that we are talking about chronically homeless individuals, many that had been homeless for over 15 years, living on the streets. And so keep that in mind when you're hearing the results and working with the chronically homeless. I think this is pretty good. So of the 24 households, we had 10 households that are now living in housing on their own. So they're still housed after the assistance has ended. So that's 42% that were able to sustain housing so far. And I'm sure some more will drop off as months go by, but that's really good for chronically homeless individuals. We have, again, 3 that were extended, and then we had 11 households that did go back to the streets. And so that's kind of the report on that. If you look at chronically homeless housing statistics, you'll see that 42% is not too bad.
That sounds fabulous.
Great.
Huge. All the years that you've worked in both the homeless prevention and homeless services, that's got to feel pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's exciting. I mean, that's 10 households that are living independently that would have not had that opportunity without some assistance and some case management by Vallejo. Vallejo did an excellent job of giving them the case management they needed while they were housed. So.
Well, similar to our discoveries by just this unexpected deep dive into broadband, which you were in on, I mean, are there some thoughts on your part for having learned what you did through this opportunity with the Housing First for future programming?
Well, I think right now we are really trying to work on our HMIS, which you are probably familiar, our Homeless Management Information System. It's our database that collects information. So if you get rent assistance, your name is put into this database. So all the agencies in town that are using it, which is many, are able to access that. And so with better data, which is what we are working on with our vendor right now through the HMIS capacity building grant, with better data, we are able to compete for more funds. And so and honestly, that's what Rochelle has been working on in our office. She has taken a second lead on that. And so the savings from the social service grants, she is now utilizing her time to help us better that process. So it's a work in progress, but long story short, I think that that data is getting better. I expect it to be really great by the end of 2021. And then we'd be a lot more competitive for Continuum of Care grant, which is where we get Shelter Plus Care and potentially the community, not necessarily the city of Topeka, but the community can apply for a chronically homeless grant, housing grant, and do exactly what we just did through the continuum of care. So that's kind of my hopes. I think this is something that we would love to replicate. It's quite expensive, but when you can house 10 people that haven't been housed in 15 years, it's worth it to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Questions?
If I may, Chair.
Yes.
I also just wanted to mention that the Homeless Task Force has been really talking a lot with each other about the funding that's in the community. There's a lot of different funding sources, and so after speaking with a council member today, it appears that maybe we need to get the word out a little bit more. So I wanted to talk about the Operation COVID-19 Basic Assistance program. So that is $1.5 million that the city has outsourced to or sole source to Community Resources Council. So this is for rent, mortgage, and utilities. The great thing about this particular program is that it doesn't have the HUD federal guidelines that really put a lot of restrictions on people to get assistance. So they can actually call CRC, Community Resources Council. That number is 233-1365 to make an appointment. Right now, their appointments are going through January. They are seeing an outstanding need. This is the only program that the city or the city of Topeka itself has for mortgage. I don't know of any other program that is serving people with their mortgage payments. So again, it's minimal requirements to get into that program, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Of course, we have our HESG still, lots of money there. But again, with the HUD restrictions, it's a lot harder for the families to get that because they have to do a lot more, behind the scenes. So just wanted to let the community know that.
Well, and there is still some carryover money in the in money that we had earlier that was COVID related, that was designated out via some of our emergency aid agencies, correct?
Yes, we have COVID money in several agencies, Catholic Charities, Community Action, Doorstep, Let's Help. There's COVID money there, but the income level for that money is 30%, which is very low. The income level for the basic needs assistance that I just spoke of is 100% of the, so this will serve people that are not extremely low income, but they're struggling just as well. Our a little bit higher income people sometimes get stuck in the middle, and we're able to serve those people, which is outstanding.
And if I can follow up with you on that, thank you, Dawn. Thank you for joining us. She's having to hop off. There's a lot of confusion out there because the state has a program as well. And I was actually going to bring it up tomorrow at the council meeting, both about the residential assistance as well as the small business assistance. Because as this is continuing, people really are struggling. They have limited amount of time and contactability, and so many are frozen is what I discover. And I have felt like as a council person and a helping person, I need a Cliff's Notes. I think we all need a list, not just of each, like the state putting out their flyer and the city putting out its flyer and the city asking the Doorstep and the others to put out their own, is a master list that's really just the very simple descriptions of those programs, and also including whether if you don't need 100% of the capacity of that program, you might need to pay your rent right now and you don't know what's going to happen next month. Is it premature for you to go and get that money? I think people are kind of caught about whether to apply, and Mike's got his hand up, so he may be wanting to add something to that list. But it's hard for those of us who want to help to pull together the referral, so we make sure we've sent the person to the best place for them. And it's been unclear also whether each of the parties along the way, whether the city, if somebody starts at the city, or they start at doorstep, or they start at the state, whether those parties are referring people around to optimize their results. You may have a better idea of whether that's happening, but it's been tough. Is there a list and we just don't know about it, or is there must be a list. Mike, punch in here.
Thank you. United Way just put a list together that is current. I was on a team meeting with them last week, and they talk about all those different areas where funding is available. The other thing I wanted to say was, working for the state, I work with other resource coordinators. As far as I've been able to tell and talking with them, Topeka is the only city that is doing the 1.5 million to help people. We're the only one in the entire state. That says something about Topeka wanting to reach out to their community. So I was pretty excited to see that. Sad that the other people don't get to have partake in it, but still excited about it. But I just want to make those 2 points. But if you contact the United Way, they have a list, and they can give you that list of resources.
I think, thank you so much, Mike. I know that I have a neighbor, for instance, who works construction, and people on his crew got COVID, so they pulled the whole crew off. He himself hasn't been sick, but he didn't get paid. And I don't know, I wasn't sure, for instance, whether he was eligible for anything. I encouraged him to go and find out, since it was COVID related. But those kinds of things, you know, at least, and if United Way's list is clear enough, then that we just all need the United Way list. That's great. Mike?
There's another list out there that if you go to auntbertha.com, they have a whole list. You put in your zip code, and for COVID relief, housing, all kinds of different things. They even had, I looked at it today, they even have Mama's Lasagna. So if you end up, you know, needing food and that sort of thing, you contact them and they'll find someone to bring you a pan of lasagna. And it's a nationwide movement that is linked into here. Made me hungry for lasagna, but just the idea that there are other things out there, but it's Aunt Bertha is the name of the site.
Well, all right. How many people already knew that? Not me. Thank you, Mike. Back to you, Corey. Anything else?
No.
All right. Well, that's all good news. Thank you. Anybody else that I didn't mean to, almost missed you, Corey. How did I do that? Anybody else with homeless information? Okay. We will plan to move forward on this recommend that it get readdressed, and we'll move on to property maintenance. And Mike Haugen is here with us. Is it Captain Badal? Is he?
Lieutenant.
Lieutenant.
No.
Okay. Briefly on the property maintenance recommendations, we handed out a draft on the 16th of November at our last meeting for people to look at. We had some conversation about that. Since that last meeting, I've had a meeting with Lieutenant Badal and Mr. Haugen, and we've done some pencil pushing to make some changes in that. There is not yet a consensus document on a final. The big aha that you'll see, hopefully, committee members, you've had a chance to look at the alternate drafts, is that although code compliance really spent a lot of time with us this summer to kind of brief us on where various issues are, that when we step back and look at the things that we overall have concern about, which would be reducing in an aspirational way, reducing the numbers of homes that we have in Topeka that are substandard. reducing as a way to set a goal anyway, reducing the gap in terms of how much we are spending on abatements and how much we're collecting, or how much we're spending on our time as well as abatements, and how much we're collecting back. Not so much the idea that we would do more or have higher fees or collect more, though those are all options, but how can we simply reduce how much we're needing to do? And I'm gonna forget the fourth one, I'll have to cheat. Work on mothballing, some way to encourage the way that vacant properties are maintained so that they do not deteriorate. And fourth, to work on beautification, vegetation control citywide. And so those were the 4 challenges that we narrowed down to in terms of what we needed to address. And again, the takeaway, the big difference that changed a lens on those 4 SMART goals as described was that it's not just property maintenance. They're the ones who can tell us about a lot of the issues, but they're not the only city department that's responsible for some of those issues and for enforcement. And further, that the solutions could be way beyond just the department. If we're talking about prevention, talking about getting substandard housing fixed and keeping it that way, changing the culture in the community to improve how people take care of their trash and their lawns and the exteriors, for instance, of their properties. That could involve initiatives, it could involve volunteer programs, all of which code compliance might participate in, but wouldn't necessarily, or maybe shouldn't, be running. And so we changed, I think there was consensus amongst us as we worked on the language to shift that lens to a community issue rather than a code compliance issue. We've since gotten communications, just I randomly have collected the ones that have come in. A gentleman who was concerned about a big fuel tank that was left in somebody's yard. Whose issue is that? People who just think that the gateways don't look good. Whose issue is that? And one that we get a lot, which is somebody who's trying to take care of a property and keep good tenants in it and concerned about the property next door or on that same block that's been a problem for a long time. Those are big issues. They're not done in a day issues, but we put together some goals to see if we could set some strategies to resolve them. Mike Haugen is here. City Manager, if I could put you on the spot a little bit, City Manager and I have chatted about whether something that's a little broader than just code compliance alone is something that would be reasonable for us to push out of this committee in terms of some recommendations. One of the challenges for us as a committee is that for the most part these would be initiatives and more administrative in nature than just changing a policy or something like that.
Well, I agree. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with some of the items are specifically to property maintenance, and that's some of the things that Mike's communicated to me is that some of these items are in other departments and they need someone else to, in other words, his position doesn't allow him to say, go do this.
Right.
It has to be referred to me, and then I need to talk to them on particular issues so that we get a good cooperative approach towards accomplishing some of these things. And then also I think, really trying to make sure we understand there are limitations within what property maintenance can do based on the quantity and the age of the homes. And so not to get over ambitious with a goal, and to make sure that we're setting something that is achievable and parsing it out on an ongoing basis so that it's, yes, I understand the desire is to accomplish a certain level of restrictions on numbers, but we also have issues with being able to, I think, get to some of those numbers in a quick fashion. So, but yes, we realize that there are other departments that have components that relate to this.
You've seen these, but I know that a lot of other things are going on, and you and I haven't sat down and actually
Right.
chewed through the various versions. It seems that we're making progress, but that we're not final yet. What-
Yeah, and I think that's really trying to make sure, Mike and I haven't sat down and had discussions on where do we feel there's a realistic expectation, what that should be. In other words, I want to make sure that we're putting it in a position where Mike and Property Maintenance Division can be effective, and make sure that it's something that's achievable.
And agreed. I mean, Mike has felt a little bit, and Mike, I'm not wanting to make you uncomfortable, but, kind of on the spot about this. And as far as I'm concerned, we had a wonderful, whatever that was, a 4 or 5 month period where we were able to do the deep dive and explore what's happened, and the code compliance from where it started, for instance, when Mike got there, has improved a lot of things, and the inspectors are doing a phenomenal amount of work. And so it was very important to me, but I think I can safely speak for the whole committee, that the exploration was not intended to be critical, but instead to figure out, to still be able to back up and say, where do we want the city to be? How do we get there? So for us to recommend something out, we could talk about it more today, but I wonder if it needs a little more time with you
I think so.
before we do anything further.
I think it does, and I think also, as we've seen, Lieutenant Badel has got involved. This is a new area for police with the assignment of this division to them, and so I think there's some education and some new eyes being put on this. And then I think with the expertise that we have with Mike and his staff, that we have some opportunity. But we also know that there are a couple of staff changes, I think, coming in your department that are going to affect this as well, with some other staff that are moving on to new positions. And so we're going to have a shortfall in capacity here coming soon. So trying to make sure that he and I have the opportunity to fully understand what's workable. I think the concepts are fine. I think we're heading down a direction of getting a hold of the concepts correctly. I think it's just what are our true goals and what can be achievable.
Yeah, for me, and this is me personally, but with lots of experience in that, what I don't want us to do is let go of what those the aspirational goals
Right.
are.
Well,
But not to expect that they're going to be done in 3 months.
yeah, and I think a good example right now, especially, is, I'll just use this, is the idea that if we were to go after volunteer trees and the other vegetation type things that we're looking at, they have lost their abatement crews from the jail, and they have limited capacity. And even when we had all of our crews, I think, we struggled to keep up. And so then if we add another component of responsibility, we're not adding resource to it, are we going to be able to accomplish what we desire to do? We can identify and say there's a need for that additional vegetation and a desire to see that be attacked, but trying to figure out what's the resource that's going to help us accomplish that.
Well, and it takes getting out of the box, as you say, because the idea is, how do we, with any of these, if there's some different strategies that we haven't deployed, that either a one-time to kind of get over the hump and get the numbers down and then look at maintenance, that will take some time.
Well, and I think too, that's part of, if, what you're seeing here is an explanation of what's desired. And then, staff being able to come back and report what's possible, what's not, and that then we can come to an agreement on where we're going to move forward for the coming year.
Well, and it has struck me that we in a way, the goals themselves aren't arguable because we know what everybody wants. We all want the same thing. We want the town to look good. We want people to be
Sure.
safe. You know, those are, and so it's how do we get there? We were not able to do the meetings with the neighborhoods in the summer
Right.
as we had hoped in order to have input on what the issues were. And then the wisdom of the committee was, well, fine, we really know what it is, just write them down and work on some goals. But they may well have some ideas we'll figure out either virtually or otherwise to see if, engage them in solutions as well, not just the
You wanna-
staff.
Any other color to what depth to what I've been trying to say? It works when you don't.
It's on.
Oh, okay. I think you touched on a lot of it very well without going over each of the
Right.
4 things step by step. You're hitting where we are. We need to enforce the codes that are on the books, especially when you're talking about your volunteer trees and your weeds and your overgrowth. And the goal setting for the properties, we're already there. We've actually hit your 50% already. Because we started at 4,000 and we're at 2,000, but that doesn't mean the need isn't there. We could do 10,000 cases this year if we had the manpower. So I think as the city manager is describing this, where we are.
Well, and the 4,300, by the way, again, we need to reconcile some numbers, I guess. That came out of the housing study. And so if that's not the right number,
Yeah,
again.
I understand.
In
Well,
2017, it was, we did a focus on housing.
Gotcha.
And we hit 4,000, and like I said, I guess we hit 4,300, it's been so long, but we broke 4,000, or we were at 4,000. So 4,300 I was cool with. You know, I was going, that's probably what we did in 17, but 18 and 19.
Well, I'm
we're
just
back.
talking about all the different venues that are looking at this
Right.
issue as well and trying to problem solve for this issue. We need to make sure we're all using the same numbers so that as we start to say we're making
Yeah.
progress, we all sync
Well,
up
I think-
with that as well.
Property maintenance has probably the more current number, and we can adjust that when we go to set the goals. And I can work with Mike to know where we're setting as the current number, and then set that, then we can establish the goal and bring that back to you.
Well, let's then, thank you both for that. Get any comments. I realize that these documents they're not long, but the committee hasn't had them very long, particularly the update from Mike. Are there some comments that the committee members would like to make before city manager and staff go back to work on these a little bit? Okay. Well, if we give some time
Yep.
and then plan
Mike and I will get together.
to visit back,
Andy,
yeah, it was productive. It was fun to work on that together. And in that case, let's if there are not more comments on this task right now, let's check calendars and set our meeting for January. This Monday afternoon, 3 to 5, I assume will remain a good time. Well, there's other groups that are meeting. Well, the police haven't scheduled ahead yet, so we're gonna get in ahead of them here. Excuse me? All right, good. Right now, all the Mondays in January look pretty good. Do you want to try for the 11th? Is that too soon for you? 11th, 18th?
I'm here.
Actually, the 18th is Martin Luther King holiday, so that's not a good day. Liz?
I have a note that Ronaldo will be gone on vacation on the 11th. I don't know what that looks like for City 4 staff.
City 4 staff just said bravely that should be fine.
I don't know, one thing we haven't discussed yet would be if we want to kind of keep this hybrid schedule, or do we want to move the committee meetings to completely virtual?
Plan for a hybrid.
Plan for hybrid.
Okay.
Well, let's go ahead and look at January the 11th then, if that works for the committee. And we will have an update on broadband as well as on code. No, property and premises. We've renamed it. Code's not in the title anymore. Property and premises. Enforcement and improvement. Anything else, colleagues? All right. Thank you. We've covered a lot. We've moved the dial on more things than we ever imagined at the beginning of the year. So thank you to everybody on the committee and all those who joined us for that work. Have a great holiday. We will rejoin on the 11th.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Neil. Councilwoman? All right. We're adjourned. Okay.